Welcome back. In this module, we're going to look at the mechanisms of aerobic and anaerobic controlled landfills. And just to remind you, we're focusing only on municipal solid waste. This is waste that's collected and managed by or for the city authority. It's mainly domestic household waste, street sweepings, contents of litter bins, and the like. We're going to start by looking at the composition of municipal solid waste. Understanding this is a very important step in the process of landfill management. Municipal solid waste can be divided into two main categories: biodegradable, also known as organic, and non-biodegradable or non-organic waste. Biodegradable waste includes organic, biological materials like food scraps, garden waste, wood, paper and cardboard, and even natural textiles like cotton. These materials are made from cellulose and break down over time, releasing gases and moisture. Non-biodegradable waste consists of materials that don't break down easily and can remain in their original form for long periods due to their synthetic or inorganic nature. Things like plastics, metals, glass, and electronics. Non-biodegradable waste remains relatively stable and is essentially just stored in the landfill. However, as organic waste decomposes, it can create conditions where metals and chemicals from non-biodegradable waste leach out, which needs to be carefully managed through landfill engineering. Another problem with non-biodegradable waste is that it doesn't go anywhere. Because it doesn't break down in the same way as organic waste does. It just sits in the landfill, taking up space. This can shorten the operational life of the landfill because it can fill up quicker. Preventing non-biodegradable waste from reaching a landfill through things like recycling and reuse can prevent this from happening. Here's an example of the results of a composition study of municipal solid waste from a typical low-income city in Africa. This shows that 68% of the waste is biodegradable. This can vary enormously and can often be much higher, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. So, it's important to undertake a composition study for your own city and understand how the waste composition influences the design and operation of the disposal site. Biodegradable waste can be highly active in a landfill. As it breaks down, it produces gases and moisture. By adjusting how a landfill is engineered and operated, we can influence these processes. We can alter the types of gases produced, modifying the quantity and quality of moisture that becomes leachate and either accelerating or slowing down decomposition. The gas and liquid emissions can then be captured, treated, or released. You can think of a landfill as a massive complex organism fed by biodegradable waste. Millions of microorganisms are breaking down this waste, producing various gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide, and creating liquid byproducts, just as any living organism would. There are four main groups of biodegradable compounds that break down in different ways, each producing unique byproducts. There's simple sugars such as starches, glucose, and fructose. These are found in fruits, vegetables, and sugary foods. They decompose very quickly and act as a primary energy source for both aerobic and anaerobic microbes. Next, we find proteins and fats. These are found in meat, dairy, and oils. They decompose at a moderate rate, releasing nitrogenous and sulfurous gases. We also find cellulose. This is present in plant cell walls, paper, and cardboard. Also, hemicellulose in softer plant tissues. These compounds decompose more slowly and require specific microbes. And finally, lignin, which is found in woody and fibrous plant material. Lignin decomposes very slowly and often remains partially intact for extended periods in a landfill. The decomposition of these compounds involves basic chemical processes which are influenced by the availability of moisture, oxygen, and nutrients. This in turn influences the type and number of microbes feeding on the waste. These conditions, along with the chemical processes they drive, dictate the rate of decomposition and the byproducts formed. This ultimately impacts the landfill's environmental footprint and emissions profile. For this reason, landfill sites are often classified as dry or wet, and as aerobic with oxygen or anaerobic without oxygen, since these conditions directly influence the biological and chemical processes occurring within the landfill. Let's look at an example of cellulose in a landfill. Much of our biodegradable waste is plant-based that contains cellulose. Left dry, our organic waste remains relatively inactive and stable. But when water is introduced, either through rainfall or leachate generated from the waste, microbes can trigger hydrolysis, breaking the cellulose down into simpler sugars like glucose. Once glucose is formed, the type of breakdown depends on oxygen availability. In the presence of oxygen, aerobic bacteria converts glucose to carbon dioxide, water, and heat. This is why freshly disposed waste can feel warm. These aerobic processes generate heat as they work. Here, only carbon dioxide and water are released, with no methane production. In aerobic landfills, carbon dioxide is emitted directly, and although it's a greenhouse gas, it isn't flammable like methane. In deeper landfill layers, where waste is compacted and oxygen is limited, anaerobic conditions take over. Anaerobic digestion of cellulose, as well as proteins and fats, is slower and involves several stages. It produces intermediate compounds like fatty acids and hydrogen gas before methanogenic bacteria ultimately release methane and carbon dioxide. This simplified reaction summary shows glucose breaking down into methane and carbon dioxide. In anaerobic landfills, methane, a powerful greenhouse gas and a flammable gas, can be captured by pipes, then used to generate electricity, with methane converting to carbon dioxide when burned. Because landfills operate for many years, conditions vary by location, depth, and age of waste, creating different zones of activity. Within a single landfill, there are typically both wet and dry areas, aerobic and anaerobic zones. But the overall design and operation determine the dominant processes and emissions. These different conditions are found to be dominant in phases through the lifetime of conventional anaerobic landfills. Aerobic conditions exist for a few months to a few years before anaerobic conditions take over. Methane then dominates as the main gas in phase 4, which can exist for 50 years or more, depending on the quantity of organic waste and conditions within the site. As we've discussed, the moisture level within a landfill is a key factor that determines the rate of decomposition of the organic waste. We can see in this chart that in wet landfills, the rate of decomposition and therefore gas generation is much greater. The waste is being degraded and all the methane gas being released within a 30-year period in a wet bioreactor landfill. In comparison, the dry landfill is much slower and continues to generate methane at lower concentrations for many more years, up to 100 years in this modelling. So now we understand the basic processes occurring in the landfill, what influences rates of organic waste decomposition, and what influence this all has on the landfill emissions. Landfills can be wet or dry, and can also be classified as to whether they are actively controlled, active gas extraction or air injection, or passive systems. So the main landfill types can be summarized as being anaerobic dry, also known as dry tomb, anaerobic bioreactor, where they are wet and active gas extraction with flaring or energy recovery is taking place, aerobic bioreactor, also wet with forced aeration, semi-aerobic that uses passive aeration, and uncontrolled to basic controlled disposal. This includes uncontrolled disposal that becomes anaerobic, as well as basic controlled landfills with basic passive gas venting. Let's look at a couple of these in more detail. These landfills are commonly found in the USA. They use synthetic liners on the base of the landfill and the top of the waste, the top applied as quickly as possible. This creates a barrier between the waste and rain, evaporation, condensation, and so on, known as the hydrological cycle. This slows biodegradation, gas and leachate production. These conditions also exist in dry, arid areas with minimal rainfall, where waste tends to dry out before disposal. Here, decomposition is slow, resulting in lower emissions, but the landfill can remain active for 50 to 100 years or more. Aerobic landfills actively pump in air and moisture to keep aerobic microbes active. This requires pipes to pump air through the landfill, keeping it oxygen rich. To maintain moisture and accelerate decomposition, leachate is recirculated through the waste. This approach minimizes methane production, accelerates waste breakdown, and lowers the chance of harmful toxins being dissolved or leached out of inorganic waste. It also lowers the biochemical oxygen demand. This means leachate is less biologically active, and the landfill can potentially stabilize in less than 10 years. The downside is there is no electricity generation to provide a revenue, and the active aeration system can be extremely energy intensive and expensive to operate. Aerobic systems are not common at all globally, as they are expensive due to the requirement to operate large air blowers continuously that consume excessive electricity or other energy resources. Even cities in OECD-rich countries would find this option very challenging to introduce, so aerobic landfill management is not recommended for African cities. This course, therefore, won't go into further details of aerobic landfilling. Designed to optimize methane production, these landfills are sealed with clay and synthetic liners. This is to prevent oxygen entry into the landfill and uncontrolled migration of methane gas out of the site and groundwater contamination from leachate. Pipes extract methane for electricity production or flaring. Leachate is recirculated to maintain optimal moisture levels in the waste to sustain bacterial decomposition. The excess leachate does require advanced treatment, as anaerobic leachate tends to be more toxic with higher biochemical oxygen demand. Because anaerobic decomposition is slower, these landfills can take 30 to 50 years to stabilize. The advantage, however, is that electricity can be generated and offset some of the operational costs. Anaerobic landfill systems can often function to generate methane gas as an energy source and/or carbon credit generation. Thus, this system intends to produce as much methane gas as possible and capture the gas for usage. The idea is the opposite of the semi-aerobic landfill system, where the system intends to reduce methane gas generation. It's also worth noting, though, that not all anaerobic landfills capture and utilize the methane. It is still common to find anaerobic landfills that only have open passive gas vents installed in the waste mass. These act as chimneys and vent the gas into the atmosphere without treatment. This is relatively straightforward and inexpensive to achieve from an operating cost perspective. However, there is a large risk of uncontrolled gas migration and buildup leading to an explosion hazard. The full economic cost of venting methane and the consequential cost of managing global climate change also need to be considered. Where possible, such passive venting should be minimized, and semi-aerobic landfills are one way to address this, which we will look at in the next module. As discussed, anaerobic landfills can have leachate that is highly concentrated and polluting. Containing and treating this leachate is critical, and thus the landfill should be engineered from the outset to be able to contain the leachate within the site using synthetic liners and drainage pipe systems as required by the site topography. There's an additional critical component of a controlled anaerobic landfill that intends to capture and extract methane gas for energy generation or flaring. That is to ensure the gas can be captured without drawing in extra oxygen from elsewhere, as well as preventing methane migrating off-site. This is an additional reason for the synthetic liner that must be carefully installed and protected through the landfill's operational life. Here we see a synthetic liner is installed under a gravel drainage layer, with leachate pipes running to leachate collection ponds and treatment system. This leachate will be recirculated through the site as the waste layers increase in height. A gas flare can be seen in the bottom right corner. During the operation of the landfill, it is critical to plan and control the placement of waste. This is achieved through the daily use of specialist landfill equipment, such as this landfill compactor. This spreads and compacts the waste to push out oxygen and maximize the density of waste to maximize the quantity of waste disposed in the landfill cell. Great care must be taken at this stage, as the methane gas is highly flammable and presents an explosion risk when it comes near to the surface and mixes with oxygen. Fires and explosions on landfill sites and near landfill sites are common due to methane gas being ignited unintentionally. Once sufficient waste is placed in the cell and is shaped to the engineered levels, the waste must be covered again by a synthetic layer or an impermeable clay layer. This is to prevent uncontrolled landfill gas emissions, prevent air being sucked into the site, and prevents rain entering the site. A leachate recirculation piping system is installed under this layer, and specialist gas well drills, as seen here, are used to drill gas wells and collect the methane gas. Gas wells can then be established within the site and gas can be extracted. Advanced management includes the recirculation of leachate through the landfill utilizing a network of explosive-proof pumps and piping. This promotes waste decomposition, gas generation, and landfill stabilization. However, this operation must continue even after the landfill stops receiving waste and can continue for more than 20 years after the last waste truck deposits waste on the site. The utilization of the site after its closure will depend on how well compacted the waste was during the operational life. This influences how much the site will settle after closure. Once settled, the site cannot be used to construct buildings on, as the risk of explosive or suffocating gas entering buildings remains high. Therefore, use is restricted to open air activities such as parks, golf courses, wildlife sanctuaries, or placement of solar panels and the like. Let's take a brief moment to look at the pros and cons for controlled anaerobic landfill. The pros are: they're an effective way of utilizing methane gas generated from landfills. They provide a way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from landfills. There's a good chance to generate carbon credits and/or electricity locally where skills exist. And they can be very large, providing correct financial and management mechanisms are put in place from the beginning and for the lifespan of the landfill. The cons? Well, to start with, it can be difficult to control the quality and quantity of methane gas to be used. The leachate generated can be more polluted and require more treatment before discharge than aerated sites. They require highly skilled site staff. They're relatively expensive to operate, even after considering selling carbon credits and/or electricity. And they require a longer time for stabilisation after stopping waste reception to the site, around 30 years, compared to semi-aerobic controlled landfilling. Finally, let's look at the key differences between anaerobic and semi-aerobic landfilling. We'll focus on the typical chemicals generated from waste elements, such as carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur. For carbon, anaerobic conditions produce methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Aerobic and semi-aerobic conditions mainly generate carbon dioxide, which is less harmful in terms of global warming potential. In the case of nitrogen, anaerobic landfills lead to the formation of nitrates. Aerobic and semi-aerobic conditions result in ammonia, which can pose different environmental challenges, such as eutrophication risks. For sulfur, anaerobic conditions generate hydrogen sulfide, known for its corrosive nature and toxic properties. On the other hand, aerobic and semi-aerobic landfills produce sulfur oxides, which are also pollutants but can be more manageable with proper gas treatment systems. It's important to note that chemicals generated by anaerobic landfilling tend to be more harmful and challenging to manage. They can contribute to higher environmental risks and even cause corrosion of landfill facilities, increasing operational costs and safety concerns. This comparison highlights the environmental benefits of adopting semi-aerobic landfill practices whenever feasible. That's Module 2 done. Don't forget the quiz, and we'll see you again for Module 3 when we'll take a look at semi-aerobic controlled landfills.